dog thing for a while. 3 tablespoons. Ready to go? All right, here we go. Yeah. All right, we're back. Sorry for the delay. Here we are. Item number 7. This item obviously will take quite a while and get all due consideration. So we probably will be taking a lunch break somewhere in the middle, but probably not at the noon, probably closer to 1 o'clock.
Good morning, board chair and board members. This is Amel Woodwani, Senior Staff Counsel with the State Water Board. I'm here with Assistant Chief Counsel Phil Wiles. The purpose of this meeting is to consider adoption of a revised draft order issued by the State Water Board on April 24th with additional revisions that were circulated on Friday, June 12th. I'm going to begin with a brief introduction on the procedural background in this matter, explaining where we are today, basically. The revised draft order resolves issues raised in 37 petitions contesting the municipal stormwater MPDS permit issued by the Los Angeles Water Board on November 8th, 2012. In July of 2013, the State Water Board indicated that it would be taking up the petitions for review. Prior to the petition proceedings, the State Water Board had held a workshop in November 2012 to consider several options for addressing compliance with receiving water limitations in municipal stormwater permits. That issue was subsequently folded into consideration of these petitions. Accordingly, the State Water Board requested responses to the petitions that addressed all specific issues raised in the petitions, but also more generally addressed whether the watershed management program approach of the Los Angeles MS4 order represented an appropriate alternative to receiving water limitations compliance in MSR permits generally. An additional workshop on receiving water limitations specifically was held in October of 2013. The State Water Board released a draft order addressing the petitions and the receiving water limitations issue on November 21st of last year. The draft order directed a number of revisions to the findings and provisions of the Los Angeles MS4 order, but it did not revise the basic structure and approach of the permit. This structure and approach includes requirements to comply with receiving water limitations and with TMDL-specific effluent limitations, but also provides for alternative compliance with these requirements over time through watershed management programs that are based in implementation of control measures. The draft order generally endorsed the structure with a number of revisions to add further rigor, transparency, and accountability to the programs. Additionally, the draft order directed other regional water boards to incorporate similar alternative compliance plans alternative compliance approaches into their Phase 1 permits and articulated 7 principles to guide these alternative compliance approaches. The State Water Board heard oral comment on that draft order in a workshop held in Los Angeles on December 16, 2014, and received written public comments through January 21st of this year. In response to oral and written comments received, the State Water Board released a revised draft order on April 24th and took written comments on those revisions through June 2nd of this month. A few additional revisions were proposed by staff in response to the written comments we received on June 2nd, and those were circulated last Friday to all interested parties. Today is the first opportunity interested parties have to comment on those specific revisions. Before we move on to oral comments, I will briefly summarize the significant revisions that we've made since the November 21st draft, since this is the first time everybody's in the same room following the discussion of that draft in November. I'm going to ask Janine to pull up a document that I created. This is an attempt to show the progressive changes made to the order. So the original November 1st draft is in the black regular text. The revisions made April 24th are in red, and then the additional revisions made June 12th are in blue. And I tried to make the page numbers correspond to the change sheet that we sent out on Friday. I couldn't get it exactly right. They're pretty close, but I will give you guys those page numbers as we go along. And as I go through these, if Jonathan Bishop wants to add anything, he should feel free to jump in. All right, so the first one is going to be on page 39 of this document that's up on the screen. This is page 40 of the change sheet that we circulated. So the order acknowledges that permittees may request extension of deadlines that are set in the watershed management programs and enhanced watershed management programs, except for final TMDL-based deadlines. These deadline extensions are subject to approval by the executive officer. They're subject to a public review and comment period and discretionary review by the board itself, the LA board. In our first draft order, we stated that technical infeasibility and substantial hardship may be grounds for a request for a deadline extension. In response to comments on the November 21st version, in our April draft, we attempted to define a measure of substantial hardship based on inability of a permittee to obtain funding. But that addition appeared to cause further confusion based on the comments we received at the beginning of June. It's very difficult to define exactly what all reasonable efforts means, and we intended for this to have a high bar, and we believe at this point that the issue is appropriately captured in the phrase substantial hardship, and that trying to define it further is simply more confusing, and that we will leave it as technical infeasibility and substantial hardship. Next revision is pages 43, 44. Let's start with 43 here. This is the same page numbers on the change sheet. Is there a way to get 2 pages up at once, or is it? We can just scroll through. Where you are is pretty good. So we made a number of revisions in the April draft, and we've refined those in the June draft that add certain reporting requirements to the order. Our purpose here is to recognize that although our review of the Los Angeles order is at this time limited to review of the order provisions themselves, those provisions are setting out the framework for the development and implementation of the watershed management programs and enhanced watershed management programs. In the end, success of the programs will be determined in large part by how carefully and diligently that development and implementation is carried out and enforced. I think this is a point that has been well articulated by the environmental petitioners, and we have tried to respond to that point within the confines of the order language itself. So we have added provisions to the order to facilitate additional periodic checks to make sure that the process is working. First, we have added a provision for a comprehensive evaluation to be done above and beyond the 2-year adaptive management process. So under the LAMS4 order, the permittees must adaptively manage their programs every 2 years anyway, but we expect the permittees to use the cumulative gain of data, information, experience over several adaptive management periods to be able to do a comprehensive update and reevaluation at some point. We played around with exactly how to set that point. If we scroll down just a little bit, it's actually under B and into the next page in this one. Here we ended up going with a date certain. That's meant to be a backstop. We've provided the regional board executive officer with discretion to decide when that should be. For example, the time of permit reissuance might be an appropriate time, so there's some flexibility there. We have also added, if we go back up, just a little bit back to page 43, the red text above that. We have also added additional reporting by the permittees to the regional board, concurrent with the adaptive management process. With these reporting requirements, we are hoping to get as concrete a picture as possible as to what on-the-ground structural controls are actually being completed and how closely the actual improvements in water quality are tracking those that are projected by the reasonable assurance analysis and the WIMS. These reporting requirements go hand in hand with an additional set of requirements for the regional board to report to the state water board. And we're just going to jump a little bit to page 58 of this version of the order. I'm jumping out of order a little bit, but those really work together, so I wanted to point it out in this order. Those are on pages 58, 59 of the change sheet. So the order directs the regional water board to report to the state water board a summary of the information gathered through the reporting that the dischargers are doing to the regional board. This is designed to allow the state water board to track whether the watershed management program approach is in fact resulting in the water quality improvements that are expected over time. I also want to note here that the adaptive management process that's already in the order is an action forcing process. In other words, permittees must make modifications to improve the effectiveness of their programs in response to the data and information they gather and report, and we fully expect that to be part of this process. All right. Jumping back to page 49, also page 49 on the change sheet. It's a little difficult, I think, are we on page 49? Okay. It's a little bit, can we make it a little smaller maybe, or is it, sorry, I should have, there we go. Okay. Okay. I think we're not in the right place. Is this definitely page 49 or? Okay. I'm looking for the stormwater compliance. It is correct, actually. There it is. Sorry. So this is these revisions are to clarify our expectation in the context of an enhanced stormwater management program of how the regional board should address compliance at the end point of implementation. The Los Angeles MS4 order states that permittees implementing the retention standard for the 85th percentile 24-hour storm will be deemed in compliance with final TMDL limitations for the drainage area of that project. We agree that the permittees should be deemed in compliance while the program and the appropriate retention control measures are being implemented, developed, and built. However, we do not find it appropriate to say that once the projects are fully implemented, permittees are in compliance with WQ bells at the final TMDL compliance deadlines, whether or not they are actually meeting those numeric requirements. In our first order, we clarified that, and we stated that permittees may be deemed in compliance at that point only if they had a plan in place for additional control measures. In our April 24th revisions, we refined that approach to allow the regional board some discretion in the particular requirements it will impose in response to that scenario. But we also made it clear in our June 12th revisions that we see limited options for addressing a situation where a final TMDL compliance deadline has arrived and there isn't actual compliance with the limitations. So we clarified that we saw limited options such as additional control measures required through a time schedule order or potentially a basin plan amendment to change the TMDL deadlines or other requirements. So now to page 52. And I know it's going to be a little difficult to read, so maybe we'll make it a little bit larger. So this is, okay, it's all of that. This is pages 52, 53 on the change sheet. So in the first set of comments we received, The environmental petitioners requested that we clarify whether implementation of the watershed management programs or enhanced watershed management programs constitutes compliance with the non-stormwater discharge effective prohibition of the order. The watershed management program provisions state that implementation of those provisions constitute compliance with receiving water limitations and interim TMDL requirements, but not that they constitute compliance with the non-stormwater discharge prohibition. We added that discussion to our order with the April 24th draft, and in our June 12th draft, we made some additional revisions in response to comments, this time from permittees, either asking that we take out the clarification or add further clarity to what our position on this was. So we tried to provide additional detail on how we read the watershed management program implementation and the non-stormwater discharge prohibition and how they relate to each other. In particular here, we are recognizing that the prohibition is a requirement for the permittees to prohibit non-stormwater discharges and that there's a programmatic element of the permit to effectuate that requirement. That's the illicit connections and illicit discharge elimination program. That program can be incorporated into the watershed management program. If there is a discharge of unauthorized stormwater, non-stormwater, so stormwater that's not authorized or specifically conditionally exempted by the Part 3A of the order, the non-stormwater discharge prohibitions, we would expect the Los Angeles Water Board to engage in a fact-specific determination as to the nature and source of that discharge and the efforts of the permittee to implement its program and to prohibit the discharge before determining whether enforcement is appropriate under that, for that particular discharge. Next, page 77 of this version, and it's page 76 of the change sheet. So this is actually text from the black text is from the November 21. The red is what we added in April, and we did not make a revision here, and I'm actually just going to explain why we did not revise the language as requested. This subsections 1 through 4 here under Roman numeral, Roman numeral 4, explain the ways in which, in the case of a commingled discharge, a discharger can still demonstrate that it did not cause or contribute to an exceedance. Several parties asked us to revise subpart 3 there by adding the phrase, at a level that would cause or contribute to an exceedance in the receiving water at the end. So it would read, demonstrate that there is an alternative source of the pollutant that caused exceedance, that the pollutant is not typically associated with MS4 discharges, and that the pollutant was not discharged from the permittee's MS4 at a level that would cause or contribute to an exceedance in the receiving water. So we did not make that change because this subpart was meant to capture a scenario where a pollutant is not attributable to a stormwater or illicit non-stormwater discharge from the MS4 but has another source. We believe that subpart 2 actually covers the circumstances that are anticipated by the permittees. If there is a discharge from the permittee's MS4, they can show under subpart 2 that that did not cause or contribute to the exceedance in the receiving water. Those are the revisions that I wanted to point out. There are a number of other revisions throughout. Some of them are refining our legal grounds for upholding or revising provisions. And I wasn't going to go through all of this at this point, but I'm happy to answer questions. These are I think the main revisions we've had since the workshop when everybody had an opportunity to address you. That's where I will stop. We have a number of scheduled speakers for this item, including several panels. So, Chair Marcus, if you'd like to proceed with the schedule.
Thank you very much. Are there questions before we listen? All right, great. There'll be plenty of questions as we go along, I am sure. We have a series of speakers and a couple who are opening and closing. It's a good sandwich here. So we have the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board for 10 minutes at the beginning and the end. And then I'm going to adjust the schedule just a trifle. Then we'll hear from Councilmember Dan Medina from the city of Gardena because he needs to leave. And then we'll have a longer panel with the LA Waterkeeper, NRDC, and Heal the Bay. Then we'll move to the County of LA and the Flood Control District. Then a panel of a series of cities. The speakers are Norman DuPont and Andre Monette. Then followed by Ray Tahir. Then we'll hear from individual speakers, and right now we're scheduled for 5 minutes each. We'll see how many we get and whether we go to 3. And then we'll have another 5 minutes from the Waterkeeper, NRDC, Heal the Bay panel, and then a close of 10 minutes from the regional board. So with that, Mr. Unger, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chair Marcus, Vice Chair Spivey Weber, and members of the State Board. I'm Samuel Unger, the Executive Officer of the Los Angeles Water Board, and with me today are Deborah Smith, the Chief Deputy Executive Officer, Renee Purdy, Section Chief of our Regional Program Section, and Jennifer Fordyce, one of our OCC attorneys assigned to the Los Angeles region. We are here today to support your adoption of the revised order. Regional Board Chair Charles Stringer regrets he cannot be here today, but asked me to convey the board's full support of the LA County MS4 permit and the revised draft order upholding it, including the modifications that your staff and council have recommended. And as will be discussed in a short while by Renee, we are requesting one minor change to the order in response to the changes circulated on Friday. But before I turn it over to Renee, I would like to briefly provide some context as to how and why we came to develop the Los Angeles County MS4 permit that is before you today. As you well know, municipal stormwater discharges can carry significant amounts of pollutants into our waterways, including trash, bacteria, metals, and organic toxicants that impair beneficial uses such as recreation and aquatic habitat. Addressing multiple pollutants is a challenge, and there's a growing recognition that addressing these pollutants in an integrated manner on a watershed scale can both reduce costs and provide multiple benefits. In recent years, stressors such as the drought and climate change have highlighted the benefits of developing and expanding local water resources to offset costs, both counted and uncounted, of large-scale water importation, as is practiced in Los Angeles County. In Los Angeles County, the potential to consider stormwater as a resource is particularly relevant due to the aquifers that are available to manage retained and infiltrated stormwater. Augmentation of local supplies not only benefits Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, but the entire state, and some might argue other states in the Colorado River Basin. In developing this permit, we sought to address the need to protect and improve water quality and implement multi-benefit solutions on a watershed scale. The Los Angeles County MS4 permit has been in place for over 2 years now, and we have already witnessed significant collaboration and investment by municipalities and the county agencies working together in watershed groups. The permittees have developed and submitted 10 watershed management programs, and a dozen enhanced watershed management programs will be submitted to us in a couple of weeks. The programs contain hydrologic and water quality profiles of the watersheds and identify the types and locations of projects to meet water quality standards. In conjunction with the submission of these programs, the municipalities have established the administrative and legal framework by which they can work together to fund, design, and build projects needed to implement their programs. Municipalities are working together with the regional board staff to identify projects, utilize modeling approaches, and develop monitoring programs, and address TMDL implementation schedules. They have also adopted LID ordinances and Green Street policies, and we are beginning to see these features included in developments within Los Angeles County. The watershed approach provided by this permit has promoted a degree of collaboration and engagement that is unprecedented. And through its incorporation of watershed approaches and focus on retention and infiltration, we feel confident that this iteration of the MS4 permit will realize both water quality and water resource benefits that the previous MS4 permits could not deliver. So with that, I will turn it over to Renee Purdy.
Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. I'm Renee Purdy, Chief of the Regional Programs Section at the Los Angeles Water Board. Happy to be here today. And I want to first thank the State Board for its consideration of our comments at the December board meeting 6 months ago to the date today, and also for considering our written comments on the draft order, as well as our written comments on the revised draft order that we provided in earlier this month. We appreciate the changes made in response to our comments and believe that those changes increase the clarity of the State Board's order and of the LA County MS4 permit, and will help ensure that the LA County MS4 permit continues to be effectively implemented. We've also reviewed the change sheet that was circulated on Friday, and I want to focus the rest of my comments on the changes to the revised draft order, specifically on page 52 of the change sheet regarding compliance with the non-stormwater discharge prohibition provisions of Part 3A of the LA County MS4 permit, where a permittee is implementing a watershed management program or enhanced program. Our review of the April 24th revised draft order, in our review of the April 24th revised draft order, we felt that State Board's discussion regarding these provisions accurately described that implementation of control measures through a watershed management program or enhanced program was a mechanism for compliance with Part 3A. And to illustrate this point, I'd like to show a schematic that we also used during the December 2014 State Board workshop. And what this schematic illustrates is that a WIMP or an EWIMP is meant to be a permittee's master plan for implementing the requirements of the LA County MS4 permit, including provisions related to receiving water limitations, TMDLs, non-stormwater discharges, and stormwater management programs, which we also refer to as minimum control measures. If a permittee chooses to develop a WIMP or an EWIMP, its WIMP or EWIMP is required to address requirements in each of these parts of the permit. So focusing specifically on the provisions related to effectively prohibiting non-stormwater discharges, where a permittee opts to develop a watershed management program or an enhanced program, its watershed management program or enhanced program must include required program elements and control measures to effectively prohibit non-stormwater discharges consistent with Part 3A of the LA County MS4 permit, as well as Part 6D, 4D, or 6D10. And I'm sorry for throwing a lot of part numbers at you, but those two parts specifically relate to permittees' illicit discharge, illicit connection elimination programs. And this requirement to include these program elements and control measures is specifically stated in the watershed management provisions of the LA County permit, specifically in parts 6C1D and 6C5B42 of the LA County MS4 permit, as I said. So therefore, a permittee's implementation of these program elements and control measures that are consistent with Parts 3A, as well as the provisions relating to the illicit connection, illicit discharge elimination program, through its approved watershed management program or enhanced program, may provide a mechanism for compliance with Part 3A, which is the effective prohibition on non-stormwater discharges. So the change sheet issued on Friday contained modifications, as Amel just went over with you, to the discussion on page 52 regarding compliance with the non-stormwater discharge prohibition where a permittee is implementing a WIMP or an EWIMP. And we believe that some of the changes may have inadvertently introduced some ambiguity, particularly the deletion of the discussion of how implementation of a WIMP or an EWIMP can be a mechanism for compliance with Part 3A. And while we weren't actually planning to suggest any additional changes to the April revised draft order, after we reviewed the change sheet and also looked at some of the additional comments on the April revised draft order, to address this potential ambiguity, we would like to suggest the following clarifying changes, which are in large part along the lines of what was in the April revised draft order previously. So at this point, I want to go over those with you. The first of these would be on page 52 of the change sheet, beginning with the third sentence. We first suggest adding 2 references to Part 6E, because 6E, which is the TMDL provisions, also contains receiving water limitations. Second, we suggest adding 2 sentences, which, let me just pull up so I can read them because I didn't bring my glasses up here, so I can't see that. So those 2 sentences would read, "This notwithstanding, Parts 6C1D and 6C5B42," and again, those are provisions within the watershed management provisions of the LA County MS4 permit, require that a permittee's WIMP/EWIMP include program elements and control measures to effectively prohibit non-stormwater discharges consistent with Part 3A and Part 6D, 4D, or 6D10. Again, those are the illicit connection, illicit discharge provisions. Therefore, a permittee's implementation of program elements and control measures consistent with Part 3A and Part 6D, 4D, or 6D10 through its approved WIMP/EWIMP may provide a mechanism for compliance with Part 3A. And again, that's largely what the revised draft order issued in April stated. In addition, we request 2 minor changes to footnote 133, which is referenced in the same section that I just read to you, and I'll show those to you on the following slide. So first, we would suggest a corresponding change to the reference not only Part 3A, but also Part 6D, 4D, or 6D10. And the reason, just so you know, that there are those 2 parts that relate to illicit connection, illicit discharge programs, is one specifically relates to the flood control district, and the other part relates to the rest of the municipal permittees under the MS4 permit. And we also suggest noting that these parts would be implemented through an approved WIMP or EWIMP. And then second, we suggest adding the word effectively before prohibition, which is simply consistent with the discussion above in paragraph C. In closing, I just want to say that while the LA County MS4 permit is certainly requiring more effort on the part of the Los Angeles Water Board and permittees, we've devoted the resources to provide the necessary oversight, and we're going to continue to seek ways to further augment these resources, knowing that the water quality and water supply benefits will be significant under this new permit, and we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, before I move to questions, do you want to comment on their suggested changes to your changes? I noticed this is a little different than what I have in my copy from before, but
Sure. So as I understand these changes, they are primarily adding references to 2 sections of the watershed management program that specifically direct permittees to incorporate some of the programmatic elements of the illicit discharge program to address 3A. So we had, in our version, we talked about the general provision in the order that says that the minimum control measures can be brought in to the watershed management program. These 2 provisions actually specifically speak to the non-stormwater effective prohibition and the program that is meant to support that. I don't think we're saying anything different, as I understand it. I think it's actually clarifying that the watershed management programs can be used to implement the measures that would then lead to compliance with Part 3A. But if Renee disagrees with that characterization, maybe we should hear from her.
I agree with that characterization.
clarification to make it absolutely clear through the reference. Okay, so we'll come back to that on the list. Questions before we move on? Okay, great. Yeah, I want to hear from everybody too. All right, next, Councilman Medina. Thank you for joining us. So I didn't let you go first as an elected official, but I actually like staff to be able to present on the thing that's being discussed.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Council. I mean, Chair Marcus and board members. My name is Dan Medina, and I am a city councilman for the city of Gardena. And our city is very concerned about the EWIMP costs that have just been recently made public to several cities. We learned that from the cities that were chosen by the EWIMP that on the average, the cost of implementing the EWIMP option is somewhere between $2 million and $4 million per square mile. And that's per year. And the city of Gardena has about 6 square miles. So that means that the EWIMP could cost Gardena anywhere from $12 million to $24 million per square mile. So please note that the city's general fund is about $50 million a year. And that represents about 24 to 48% of that budget. And since nearly 80% of it goes to public safety, police, fire, emergency dispatch, all the other operating departments would have to be basically eliminated. And since the costs are based on the MS4 permit requirements that are consistently among the EWIMP cities and various sub-watersheds, we have to really take them seriously. And to be compelled to participate in the EWIMP would probably bankrupt our city and force it into a disincorporation. Therefore, given the obvious economic infeasibilities of the EWIMP, the city of Gardena is asking the state board to clearly specify the final order that the iterative process implemented through the normal stormwater management program be a legally valid compliance option. We believe that it is, and therefore we're prepared to litigate on this issue if necessary. And I thank you for giving me the time. I thank you for the time that you've given me to speak. And I would like my statement to be included as public record. And if there's any time left over, I would like to turn that over to our consultant, Ray, to hear. And thank you for your time.
Where did you get your numbers? Because they sound high. Well, I know. I'm sorry, Ray. I'll hear from you later. I'm positive, and from others. But did you get them from Ray, or did you get them from the?
Yes, and I'm sure he'll explain that to you when he comes up to speak up as well, right. Unless you find some fault in that.
Right, but you've talked to no one else besides your council.
Correct. And needless to say, it's a major concern for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be considering the alternative. And thank you, again, thank you for your time. I have to rush back to Gardena and go to a veterans hospital to do some other stuff. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll try and follow up with you as well afterwards so you know what happened. Do you want to clarify anything, ML, or do you want to wait till we go through? Because I'm sure Mr. Tajir will talk about it.
Not at this point, thanks.
Let's wait and do it more efficient. And next, let's go to the panel of the Los Angeles Waterkeeper, Natural Resources Defense Council, and Heal the Bay. Hi, you have 30 minutes. Long.
Morning, Chair Marcus, members of the board. My name is Steve Fleishley. I'm Water Program Director at the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm here today as a joint presentation with NRDC, Heal the Bay, and Los Angeles Waterkeeper. As you know, last week, Governor Brown participated in an hour-long interview with the Los Angeles Times regarding water in the West, with a lot of emphasis on climate change and the drought. And I was delighted to hear the governor say that we have to develop stormwater capture as a way to address these challenges. He has also said that unprecedented action is needed. We agree. The revised draft order claims that over the last decade there has been a paradigm shift happening from viewing stormwater as a liability to viewing it as a regional asset, and that the LAMS4 permit was drafted to incorporate this new paradigm into its structure. Unfortunately, the revised draft order falls well short of both the governor's statements and the alleged intent of the permit. Indeed, The revised draft order represents a gross abuse of power and an abdication of responsibility with regard to addressing both our water supply and water quality challenges. And I don't say that lightly, having appeared before this board for 20 years. A gross abuse of power and an abdication of responsibility. We need strong leadership on this issue, and we are looking for you, the members of the board, to provide that. If your intent is to incentivize stormwater capture for water supply benefit, the environmental community is happy to support that. But your actions must match your words. And unfortunately, the revised draft order falls well short of any serious effort to promote stormwater capture. The WIMP provisions, as opposed to the EWIMP provisions in particular, do not require any water supply considerations. But the revised draft order treats the EWIMPs and the WIMPs the same, even though they are not. And in doing so, it provides a safe harbor to dischargers that are responsible for the #1 cause of water pollution in Southern California. That's because if a permittee develops, implements, and meets all the requirements and deadlines in an approved watershed program, then at least during the implementation period, the permittee is deemed in compliance with receiving water limits not otherwise covered by a TMDL. Los Angeles County has already argued, and the federal court has so far agreed, that the WIMPs serve to moot any injunctive remedy in court on water quality standards. If that holds, that would strip citizens of the right to enforce permit limits based on what has just been paper compliance with the WIMP development process. The permit also suffers a litany of legal deficiencies, including violating anti-backsliding and anti-degradation requirements. And yet, this permit represents your most important opportunity at both a local and statewide level to do something meaningful to promote stormwater capture while also protecting water quality, which is even more critical, as you know, during this time of drought. These can be good solutions no matter the weather, so that when it does rain, and it will rain again, as we all know, we will be prepared to take full advantage of that. In a moment, Rita Campoloth from Heal the Bay will provide some remarks about the WIMPs. We have repeatedly said that the WIMP provisions in the permit are not worthy of any type of safe harbor. The WIMPs are simply an example of bureaucratic paper pushing without any requirement for stormwater capture. Then Dr. Booth from the Bren School at UC Santa Barbara will explain to you, Dr. Derek Booth from UC Santa Barbara will explain to you just a sampling of the deficiencies already being seen in the WIMPs. These deficiencies cannot be ignored. The board should not stick its head in the sand and pretend that the WIMP process will work when we know it already doesn't. The WIMPs are merely a repackaging of a failed iterative process, a process that the revised draft order acknowledges has been underutilized and ineffective to date. And finally, Liz Crossan from LA Waterkeeper will explain a bit more about the legal gymnastics taken in the revised draft order to defend the flawed permit. The bottom line is that the safe harbor should be removed from the permit, most notably for the WIMPs, so that dischargers truly have an incentive to implement stormwater capture measures to help address the enormous water supply and water quality challenges we have in Los Angeles, especially during this historic drought. Please don't miss this important opportunity to help ensure stormwater permittees do everything they can to be part of this solution. Thank you.
Chair Marcus, Vice Chair and members of the board, once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue. As Steve mentioned, we have real concerns about the requirements the permit sets forth with the WIMPs in particular, and the missed opportunities to ensure that multi-benefit projects are prioritized. Taking a step back from that, though, we are also concerned that the safe harbor provision may lead to reliance on plans that do not provide reasonable assurance that compliance limits will be met. The WIMPs are an example of that. With Dr. Booth's assistance, With Dr. Booth's assistance, we evaluated 3 WIMPs in detail, Lower LA River, LA Upper Reach 2, and Lower San Gabriel River. We reviewed the original WIMPs and then regional board staff's detailed review and comments on them. We then reviewed the revised WIMPs to evaluate the responsiveness to staff comments. Unfortunately, on numerous points, important points, The revised WIMPs failed to address staff concerns. Surprisingly, these revised WIMPs were then approved with conditions that also did not address a number of very important staff concerns. On the slide is a table that summarizes some of the more important deficiencies that will remain in the WIMPs even if they meet the conditional approvals. And Dr. Booth will explain them in further detail. As you will see, these deficiencies really undercut the ability of the WIMPs to provide assurance that water quality goals will be met.
Chairman Marcus and board, thank you very much for having me come here today. I believe we provided your staff with a full set of this table, also a brief biography of myself. I'm an adjunct professor at the Brent School at UC Santa Barbara, but I've been working in stormwater for nearly 30 years. I worked in local government for 10 years. I've been involved in watershed planning since nearly the entirety of that time, and I also work as a private consultant. So I have seen this from many different sides. The permit as written, particularly for the watershed management program, has missed an opportunity to achieve the multiple levels of benefits for stormwater management that have been advocated by the regional board and by the state board. But even within the limited ambition of the permit, I'm really dismayed to see that the current WIMPs really fall far short of their required minimums, neither in the original submissions nor in response to the board staff comments, the revisions. We've not yet seen the subsequent revisions that were due on Friday, but based on the conditional permit letter, which only addressed a modest subset, typically 7 or 8 or 9 points extracted from many pages of regional board staff comments of deficiencies, it seems highly unlikely that they will actually meet the grade. In the limited time that I have here before you, I'd like to focus on just a few key elements, most of which were already flagged by the regional board staff in their original review, but which led to no change in the revised plans, of which this table has a compendium of them. I simply don't understand how that can result in a conditional approval regardless. The April conditional approval letter, again, flagged only a modest subset of these, and so we find that there really are substantial deficiencies that are almost certainly remaining in the nominally final WIMPs. To be clear, I reviewed just 3 of them, the lower LA River, the lower San Gabriel River, and upper reach 2 of the Los Angeles River. What to me at least is most striking in all of these plans is an absence of a tangible commitment to actually taking actions. There is a commitment to tracking progress. There's a commitment to trying, but there's also the clear statement and equivocation that there are commonly no resources presently dedicated to the vast majority of these projects, and therefore no clear assurance, if you will, that any of this is actually going to happen. And again, I worked in local government for 10 years. I really do know how this works. The permit requires specificity as to best management practices, and which in total should demonstrate that they achieve the compliance requirements. So just for example, the permit says, permittees shall demonstrate that activities and control measures will achieve all limitations. The plans say there is no funding source to pay for these controls. The staff review said the WIMP should at least commit to the construction of the necessary number of projects to ensure compliance. I did not see that requirement restated in the conditional approval, and there is no expectation that that will happen. Certainly the revised plans that were submitted in response to the staff comments did not include any substantive change to that. So just to be clear from a local government perspective, if there is no requirement, a legal mandate, then there will be no funding forthcoming. And if that chain doesn't happen, then there will actually be no outcome. Not only is there no evaluation or assurance of compliance, but there's also no substantive attempt to evaluate the schedule for that compliance, even though the permit clearly calls out for committing to a schedule. The staff review said the MS4 permit requires that the plan demonstrate, using the reasonable assurance analysis, that the activities will achieve receiving water limitations as soon as possible. But there was no change in the draft plan, and there was no articulation of that as part of the conditional approval. And in fact, in particular for the upper reach 2 of the LA River, the model, such as it is, has not been calibrated. In fact, it's not even clear from the language in the plan that it's even ever been run. Everything is cast in terms of a future anticipation. So the conditional approval letter says section 4.5, model calibration of the LA River plan, upper LA River plan, which is about 3 sentences long. Daily baseline concentrations and loads will be determined from the 90th percentile. So despite the conditional approval requirement that the plan submit findings from the model to demonstrate progress, to be clear, that model may or may not exist. It certainly, as of the April letter, had not been run under any kind of calibrated conditions. There is no assurance that one can come away from with this kind of analysis or absence of analysis. And if that is the goal and the intent of the permit and of these plans in the permit, it simply is not achieved, and it leaves us with a very uncertain outcome. So in summary, I'm a strong believer in watershed planning. I was part of the National Research Council's group on stormwater management. I helped co-write the chapter on watershed planning and watershed management. And I've been doing this work since 1987. But if under the permit planning is to be equated to or judged an adequate surrogate for permit compliance, then it has to be real. And at least the current versions of these plans are not real. They're a statement of good intention, but nothing more. And I really fear that any kind of approval of them is simply going to further reduce the chances that we actually achieve tangible benefits on the ground. Thank you very much.
You're not coming back. I wanted to ask a question on the argument. No, but I wanted to, I'm not sure who to ask in the.
Do you want to do it after we're done?
So y'all, whoever wants to answer can, or I can wait on it. I'll let you all finish and then I'll come back to it. Sorry, I don't want to break up your flow, but there's some very important issues in what you both just raised. And I want to be able to talk with staff, not just about the substance, but about process. So.